The SCG holds a very special place in Sydney's heart and has done so for more than 120 years. It's renowned throughout the sporting world, an arena like no other where the old and the new sit side by side. The title of Sydney Cricket Ground officially came in 1894, 8 years after the opening of a members' pavilion that would come to symbolise the arena's majesty. The ground gradually began to take shape, with the ladies' pavilion following on, and the people flocked to Moore Park. The SCG staged its first cricket test in 1882 and attracted big crowds in the ensuing decades, especially when a dashing young Sydney-sider by the name of Victor Trumper strode to the middle. A cycle track hugged the perimeter for over 2 decades, attracting the nation's finest riders, while athletics was also a big draw card. The SCG was home to the Wallabies, but the amateurs refused to share the ground with professionals until rugby league was finally allowed onto the ground in 1911, 3 years after the breakaway code's formation. In the late 1920s, a youngster by the name of Don Bradman came along and hit an unbeaten 452 for New South Wales against Queensland. The Don's highest test score at the SCG came at the other end of his career in 1946, a knock of 234 in a crushing innings defeat of England, with Sid Barnes matching him run for run.
Bradman and Barnes each scored 234, a record partnership. It was Australia's test, and Bradman's last on the Sydney Cricket Ground.
In between, he was a central figure in the brutal bodyline battle of 1932, where teammate Stan McCabe wore plenty of bruises en route to making a brave 187 in the opening test. The Sydney Cricket Ground confirmed its status as Australia's premier sports venue when in 1938 it successfully hosted the Empire Games, which was later to become the Commonwealth Games. In Bradman-like fashion, St George dominated rugby league by claiming a staggering 11 consecutive grand final triumphs from 1956 to 66.
St George win 23-4, taking their 11th successive premiership, a world record in any code of football.
The moments after the 1963 decider became enshrined in Australian sporting folklore, as Herald photographer John O'Grady captured rival captains Norm Provan and Arthur Summons in a muddy embrace, producing a celebrated image dubbed the Gladiators. 2 years later, the SCG welcomed its biggest ever crowd for any event, when over 78,000 fans crammed in to see the Dragons deny an emerging South Sydney side in the big one.
Walsh to Rasmussen, cutting out Smith with a long pass, he sends King in to score.
John Sattler famously led the Rabbitohs to grand final glory with a broken jaw against Manly. There was high drama in February 1971 when England captain Ray Illingworth led his side from the field after teammate John Snow was manhandled by a spectator. And league history was created in 1977 when St George and Parramatta played out the code's first ever drawn decider.
It's a try! Yes!
But the biggest story of all in that era was the advent of World Series cricket.
Oh, what a good shot. Great Chappell.
The game dramatically split down the middle, and the rebel competition didn't gain access to the ground until its second season in 78-79, which saw the addition of floodlighting at a cost of $1.2 million.
And there's that sight. What a magnificent sight. Historic sight as well. SCG under lights.
With the spectacular Sydney Football Stadium, now of course Allianz Stadium, under construction in the late 80s, the last rugby league grand final at the SCG came in 1987, when Manly denied a gallant Canberra side.
He's going to score, yes he is! It's a certain try!
With rugby league relocating next door, Australian rules football became the dominant code played at the SCG. South Melbourne shifted to the Harbour City in 82 and became the Sydney Swans. The club endured some dark days in those early seasons, but eventually became a force to be reckoned with.
Look at the most important kick of his career. Any score will do. He kicks.
3 years after reaching the 1996 Grand Final, Tony Lockett had the SCG buzzing when he broke the code's all-time goal-kicking record.
It's going to go! He's come back! And aren't we privileged to be a little part of it?
A new century arrived, but the cricket ground's timeless appeal endured, and fresh, unforgettable chapters like this were written.
Sconford, there it is! Great moment in the history of Australian Test cricket.
4 years after Steve Waugh's remarkable last ball ton, Sydney said farewell to a trio of modern-day greats in Shane Warne, Glenn McGrath and Justin Langer as Australia swept to a 5-0 Ashes success.
We're seeing a wonderful moment in the history of Australian cricket.
The SCG celebrated its 100th Test match in January 2012, and it was fitting that a local lad should dominate. Michael Clarke became the first man to post a Test triple century on the hallowed turf.
Leg stump, that'll do it! What a wonderful shot to bring it up on as well. What a moment for Michael Clarke. Not just as a player, but as a captain, here on his home ground.
Blessed with a glorious past, the Sydney Cricket Ground now looks towards the future, undergoing rapid transformation through the addition of the magnificent Don Bradman, M.A. Noble and Dally Messenger stands to ensure it remains the jewel in Sydney's sporting crown.